This podcast was sponsored by and recorded at Crossing's Pub and Eatery on Hyde Park.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you may be listening to us. We welcome you back to another edition of the Vicars Crossing, coming to you again from Crossing's Pub and Eatery on Hyde Park Road in London. And my name is Rob Henderson, and I'm the rector and priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Anglican Church in London.
Kevin George here. I am also happy to be here at Crossings. I am the priest and rector of St. Aidan's Anglican Church in Northwest London. Right. Not too far from here, thankfully. We can get here very quickly, as we did on Tuesday night after a parish council meeting, and enjoy an appropriate adult beverage after a long meeting.
Of course, yeah. Very good. And Ian's here too, producer Ian. How we doing?
I'm good. Just finished exams, just relaxing now.
Now you get to kick back for a little bit.
Chillaxing in the hood.
Chillaxing in the hood. That's right. That's right. Good. Ian taking care of all of our technical issues as they come up and getting us all set up. So a real important part of our team. And so we're glad he's here. And we're back for another round of chatter. And it's last day of January that we're recording today.
Frigid.
And it is cold.
Frigid.
Kevin, it is cold. You wouldn't believe how cold it was.
It's pretty cold.
How
cold was it, Rob?
I saw Winnie the Pooh wearing pants.
Really? That cold?
It was that cold.
Come on.
I mean, it's like, it's cold, Kevin.
It's not a good day to be a brass monkey.
It's colder than a Doug Ford efficiency.
And that's pretty cold. That is very cold.
That's really cold.
I think it's not a good day to be a brass monkey. Now, I just want to, for clarity's sake, make people understand that when I say brass monkey, people think of that expression as cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. And they think that that's rude, but it's not. It's a naval term.
Okay.
I don't know if people are aware or not.
Fill us in, because you got me wondering now.
Right. So in the old warships, when they had cannonballs, the rack that held the cannonballs was called the brass monkey. And when it would get cold and the metal would contract, the cannonballs would fall off. And so they would say it's cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey.
Well, there you go.
How do you like that, gentlemen?
Very good.
Wow. Starting off with some good,
And Ian, you have my permission to use that as a pickup line.
Oh, I will.
This portion of the program brought to you by Webster's Thesaurus.
We're pretty lucky to have another guy with us here today. We thought we'd have a little fun today. We've been meaning to do this since we got going. But this guy is so elusive. It's like trying to find, Jimmy Hoffa. This guy is, he's not easy to get. But one of the managers here at the two Crossings location is a great guy named Stephen Rogers, who I had the opportunity to get to know a little bit in the summer, and who so willingly jumped aboard when we talked about this idea of having our podcast hosted here. So we welcome you, Stephen.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Looking forward to a nice
Good
little
to see you. And
chit-chat.
Stephen, Huron alum, too.
Yes,
Huron College,
that's right.
which we all have
Yeah.
spent time.
That's
So
near and dear to our hearts.
That's right.
We all are happy with what are we now? We're leaders with heart.
Are we now?
We're leaders with heart.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad we
Larry
turned
Craig.
into something.
I, my friend, am a leader with heartburn.
Yeah, there we go.
Good.
Now, what are you drinking over there, Robbie?
I've got a little
this
something
beautiful
from
pub.
Toronto. Stephen, what am I drinking here from Toronto?
You've got the Ace Hill Vienna Lager.
Right.
Tell us about it.
Very
You
nice.
must know about this, Stephen. You sell it.
Well, I do sell it. Yeah, it's a little bit maltier than your standard, but it's still highly carbonated. And Ace Hill's got a lot of great stuff. They just launched, I think, late spring last year, and so we added on 2 of their products, and it's been selling really well. And
from Toronto.
From Toronto, yeah.
All right. What do you got going, Kevin?
I got something a little closer to home. I'm drinking a Powerhouse Irish
Red.
Irish
Buckley's
Red.
Irish Red.
Buckley's Irish Red.
Buckley's.
Taste awful, but it works.
I'm
For cold
assuming
and flu
that's
season.
the slogan they're going to run with, or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like
No,
that.
this
But
actually
it's really
tastes
nice,
wonderful.
right? It's wonderful, yeah.
It's got a little malty finish to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we had the APA originally, which is a great beer,
Yeah.
but it was kind of competing with the ales we have from Sons of Kent.
Okay,
so
yes,
they launched that Irish Red, and really we don't have anything that's in that realm. And Powerhouse is obviously nice, local in London.
Yeah.
So we just sold out a keg in a week. So
Oh, is that right? So it's picking up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I quite like it.
No, it's delicious.
It may become my favorite of those craft taps you've got down there.
And it's a bit different.
Ian, what do
so
you
nice.
got going on over there?
I've got root beer.
Dad's root beer. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, poor
like a
Rob
good dad.
Stevenson has lost his root beer. His
And
dad
I
has
like a good
lost his
dad's
root beer.
I'll tell you.
Isn't that something?
Ian's like our little Radar O'Reilly.
He is. We used that reference, and nobody in the room got it.
Well,
No.
we're old though.
But yeah,
But that's like instead of dads, he had the great knee high. See,
he
Radar
had the
did.
knee high.
And
Yeah.
so we're passing that along.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Go home and YouTube it.
YouTube
It's a good
Radar
show.
O'Reilly when you get home. And all you listeners out there, if you're too young to know who Radar O'Reilly is, Google it. YouTube it, and you will see that he is the funniest dude going.
Good.
How's your sports team doing there, buddy?
My hockey team's not doing well.
No? Red Wings.
My Detroit Red Wings are not doing well.
Oh, I see.
But I'm looking forward to spring training. I've been reading a little bit about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Tigers,
Tigers
and getting
are-
ready for the new
yeah.
season. So
Yeah.
looking forward to that.
It's not
And,
so far away now. It's awful cold today to think about baseball, but
Well,
but
when
spring
you're a Red
training is
Wing
right
fan, you got to be thinking about.
Are you from Detroit?
No, I spent a lot of time in Windsor.
Oh, okay.
And was a
Classic.
kid in
Yeah, yeah.
Windsor and kind of grew up there, so I
sort of
ended up
taken on.
following the team and doing that. So what
Yeah.
about you?
Well, my
your
Habs
doing
are
well.
believe it or not, the Montreal Canadiens, who are not supposed to be in it this year at all, we're supposed to be playing for a draft pick, are 1 point, I believe, behind the mighty Maple Leafs. You know, the ones that they were planning the Stanley Cup parade
That's
for
right,
earlier in
that's
the
right.
season. And now all of a sudden I see Gary Roberts out saying, it's really hard to play in Toronto. These young kids are going through a lot. So let the
yeah.
excuses begin.
That's
you know,
right,
it's
that's
just
right.
I just hope they get into at least the first round, get some experience under their belt for those young guys.
Now,
and
what,
next
what,
year.
what about you,
Steven,
Stephen? Are you a Leafs fan? You're sounding sympathetic to it.
I'm not I shouldn't sound like I've got an allegiance to one side or the other, but yeah, actually my dad is a Habs fan, but
well,
I
your
was
father is a brilliant man.
Yeah, and I was a Maple Leafs fan as a kid, so I know it's a dichotomy that doesn't really
Right.
work, but
Right. Well, this weekend we're getting ready for Super Bowl, which is always a big event.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
Anything
that's gonna be
going on
fun.
here for
we
Super
we
Bowl
always
per se?
have we've got all the TVs downstairs going, but normally it's not too busy here on the Sunday. We've got drink specials, we've got app specials to try and drive in that crowd, but I think normally people are either staying home for the Super Bowl these days. Or they're
Seems to
going
be the
a-
big thing,
That
doesn't
seems
it?
to be
Yeah.
the thing, yeah.
Or they
yeah.
go to a much bigger sports bar, which we're not. We're more so like the wife wants to go out for a really nice meal, and so then the husband comes along and then makes sure the game's on. Type
I'm
thing.
not sure. I'm not sure the wife likes it when I call her the wife. I just want to.
I was talking about two hypothetical people.
Well, if you're looking for somewhere to go, and the
Yeah.
TVs will be on, we should
Absolutely,
say,
yeah. Super
Well,
Bowl's
this is a
always
great
on.
place just to sit and relax, watch
Yes,
the game.
And
absolutely.
the food is
enjoy
great.
it.
Like
Yeah.
I mean, we in fact we were just talking about we have a night out on Saturday evening with our wives.
Yeah.
And we're saying, I think we'll just pop in here and have a bite to eat before we
Absolutely.
go out to the show because it's a good spot and it's local and
For
and of
sure.
course we appreciate all you do for us.
Oh well, I'm happy to help in any
So,
way. I
Stephen, tell
can.
us a little bit about how you found your way here and what
Yeah.
brings you to Crossings. And
Absolutely. So I went to Huron, as you guys mentioned. I went to Huron from 2012 to 2016. I graduated with honor specialization in political science. So no theology background there, but obviously going to an Anglican college, you get a lot of exposure there. I was really involved in the Students' Council and dealing with the Faculty of Theology Council as well. And then after my undergrad, I went to across the street to Western for my master's. And then it was about a week after, I think it was literally a week after finishing my thesis, where I was like, wow, I need a job.
funny how it always
That
comes
always
back to
sort of
that.
smacks you right in the
It always
face, doesn't
comes
it,
back to
Stephen?
that.
And I have a big passion for mixology and some bartending experience. So I just figured, I had heard so many great things about Crossings. I'd been there a couple times myself and always loved it. So I walked in with my resume, and not to make a long story out of it, I bypassed the bartending job and ended up as a manager.
Oh, wow.
So I've been here
Good
for
for
a
you.
year and a half so far. About 4 months ago, I took over the other location, looking over there, I should say, on their beverage side, and it's been a lot of fun.
So tell us about the two locations. I mean, you just said the other side. So for our listeners who are in the London region and who
Absolutely.
might be able to get near this place, if you're not living here, you're driving through London, you come through. There's Crossings has two great restaurants.
Yes,
Tell
we
us
do.
about both of them and
Yeah.
what they have to offer. And
Absolutely. So the Crossings that we're at right now, Crossings Hyde Park, was the first location. It started 9 years ago in 2010. and we're located in a really nice Victorian era home that's over 150 years old. So it has a heritage status, which is kind of a nice focal point in the neighborhood. And then they opened a location on Warrencliffe in Lambeth, which is a wonderful neighborhood. I think it was 3 or 4 years after that, once we had gotten our roots in the ground here. And the Lambeth location's excellent. It's a little bit smaller footprint, but that's actually nice in some ways. It's a little bit more cozy. You have a great atmosphere over there, and they have a private room as well. So we've got 4 private rooms here because we were a multi-story house. They've just got the one level there, which is really nice as well. So, and then what we're trying to do over the next little bit is kind of consolidate the menus, so they'll be identical at both. They've got a little bit of cool things. We both have a little cool things that are different at each location, but they've got a great thing going over there. So
Yeah, we'll put you on the spot a little bit because you mentioned this is a heritage home.
yeah.
Do you know some of the history behind that? Or again,
You know what? To be honest, before this podcast, I did a little Google research and London Library research. I couldn't find that much about it, but the cool thing about this building is when they purchased it, they found all these photos along the walls.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All the photos on the walls are antique photographs dating back to the late 19th century.
Wow.
So
Of the
there's-
house, too.
Of the
For those
house.
who
yeah,
can't
I've
see
seen them
they're-
before. And
Yeah.
they're really
and there's a
nice.
portrait downstairs of the original owner.
Okay.
And it was I know it was a, there were stables here, and it was some sort of hunt club. I don't think it was
Okay.
the original hunt club,
No,
but
no.
it was a riding association here, and you can see that in all the photos.
Sure.
But
And
you
the
know,
people
going
who
down-
are from the area, I think they'd recognize that at one point this was called the Horse and Hound.
yes, it was
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I do remember that years
Yeah.
ago when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And that was a really popular restaurant too.
Yeah.
From what I gather, it was before my time.
So these rooms you mentioned, you've got like rooms over there in Lambeth, but here too. For those who haven't had a chance to come in here, what is it that you're able to offer in terms of those rooms?
Absolutely. So our largest room can fit up to 50 people. It's got the projector screen, all the media that you would ever need for a party.
Yeah.
And so that's our largest. We don't charge room fees if everyone is getting at least.
Toasted?
Yeah. Well, no, not so. Well, we've got a very
breakfast with their toast.
Yeah, that's right. A very small. If everyone orders either some sort of food item or a beverage, there's no way we're charging a fee.
Yeah.
We're in the second largest room, which also has a TV in it, a little bit more cozy. And then we have also 2 smaller rooms that are semi-private as well. So we can really accommodate any party size, because I've done parties as large as 200 and just given them the whole upstairs,
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
which is really nice.
Yeah.
It's hectic, but it's
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
and aside from that, both locations have patios, which is
Yeah.
a whole other dimension in the summer. And
Yeah.
we've got one of the best patios, if not the best patio in the city.
Yeah.
And it's always nice in the summer when
Yeah,
that's.
they
Well, we were
really
just
do.
saying before we went to recording that the patio
Yeah.
is the big thing during the
In
year.
the
and,
summertime,
boy,
man,
this
the
place
patio here is
humming. Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah.
yeah. And when you see that parking lot just
Yeah.
fall all the way back, that's the other thing too, right? Like, on one hand, it is a little bit inconvenient being on such a far end of the city, but
Right.
we have a huge amount of free parking. No one ever has to worry about that. And as this development kind of
Oh, yeah,
rises
this is
around in
gonna
Hyde
fill in.
Park, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
yeah.
So, Phil, a couple of weirdos come in here, priests, and
And say, hey,
and with Radar O'Reilly,
And
with
Radar
their
O'Reilly shows
producer
up with
Ian
his grape
Radar
knee-high.
O'Reilly, with his grape knee-high, yeah, and says to you, at least one really strange priest in myself, says to you, hey, listen, here's what I want to do. I want to come in here with my buddy, and we want to do a podcast. We want to call it the Vicars Crossing, which is an old term for clergy, certainly in the UK, and we want to do it at a place called Crossings, and we'd love to have your support and participation in that. And I was very grateful that you agreed to that, and sponsored it by helping us pay for the equipment here and giving us this space every week. And thank you, Christian, even cold beverages today. So
That's right. Thanks,
and,
Christian.
And so maybe you can talk to our listeners about why you think it's important for Crossings to get involved with this venture we've got going.
For sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I can preface it by saying I was born and raised mostly raised in London for all my life. So, I mean, I feel a great attachment to the city. And then when I started at Crossings, I was blown away by the amount people were asking for charitable donations. Just every day it seemed there was some sort of local sports team, charity, some sort of venture that was asking for gift cards or some sort of help. And I was also equally blown away by the amount which the ownership agreed. Like, especially as we're not a huge restaurant chain, right? Like, you would think that at a certain point, you'd say, well, you know, we're all out for this
Tapped
month.
out?
Yeah, exactly. No pun intended.
I see what you did there.
Get 'em!
Boom, there it is.
But you really see like the return on investment by being a community involved business, and that's something I take huge pride in, and it's something that differentiates us, I think, from larger chains, that we can kind of have our roots in the community. Everyone knows that we're involved in every venture, and with you guys, it's so nice to know that we've helped support a venture like this, and it's not even from a restaurant side. It's something I'm interested in as a political science major from an Anglican college. I love listening to you guys talk about the subjects, and it seems like every week too I've got someone coming in from we're from St. Aidan's, and it's like thanks Kevin for bringing them over. So it's such a pleasure to have you guys here and kind of continue our outreach in the community. So
we couldn't have picked a more perfect spot and name for a program like this.
That's right.
called
No, you really
Crossings.
couldn't. No, exactly.
Because our initial conversations were about, you know, how do we bring our conversations about how faith interacts with and lives in the public square, and how those two things crisscross, and to end up here, and it was perfect. So we're very appreciative that you were able to do that for us and give us this space and sponsor us. And,
well, you guys are such a
help.
huge stakeholder in the community as you know, a faith religious institution, and as you start engaging with all these charities and community organizations, you kind of recognize all the pillars, right? So it was just the other day we had the London Police Emergency Response Team here.
Oh, did you?
In all their gear. Such nice guys, like really, really, truly nice.
Did they bring in guns?
They were decked out in their gear, really cool. They were asking for donations for their local.
Did they hold a gun to your head when they asked for the
No,
donation?
no, not at all.
That's a good
very,
thing.
very charming. And they had a local dinner coming up for, I think it was for the Children's Hospital, I think.
Yeah,
anyway,
I think that's one of their big charities, actually.
And so
they
of
do
course,
great work.
We give to that, and before that, I had the Pink Dress charity event for breast cancer.
Oh, yes.
And that was just a couple days before that. So you kind of quickly realize that you go down the pillars of all these community organizations and charities, and it's nice to kind of see a wholesome picture of everybody that's involved in this city. So
and you got a role to play as a business here.
Absolutely.
In taking part in what's going on in and around the community, and so it's important to have the voice that we have and be able to pass that along. So.
It's great too, just the sort of corporate responsibility, right, in terms of corporate citizenship.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of what we talk about is how people live out their faith principles in the public square and so on, or how the church or the institution of faith communities, not just the church, but other faith communities, can have that interaction. But one of the ways that I think one of the things we had to be cognizant of is when we see, a corporation or a business like this one doing good work and extending themselves beyond just making money,
right,
to do something good. Sometimes, we need to look to places like corporations like this that sometimes do work that need to say to the rest of us, you don't have to keep everything for yourself.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
You can actually be a leader in the community to help others. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that the owners here and with the fine people that work here like yourself, Stephen, have obviously advanced.
Yeah. And we often say, or I often say as a faith leader in my congregation, there's things going on outside of where we are as a church and a church body in and amongst the community that point to some of the transformation that we always talk about in faith formation and faith life and that sort of thing. And there are places like yourself that are participating in that. And how do we, as a church community, step outside of our doors and
Right.
recognize that,
Yeah.
and invite you to get involved in it, because
Right.
it's not just us sitting back anymore waiting for it to happen.
That's
We got to
right.
step in the door, as Kevin did. And what we found is people are more than willing to partner with us and faith communities and take part in the bigger whole and something bigger than ourselves. So, so that's important.
Well, it pays dividends too, right? Not literally, but it's kind of similar to, I'm sure, the individual lessons you guys teach in your church, where do good unto others, and it's kind of going to come back onto you. And it's the same thing as a business, right? Everybody that comes here, I hope, knows that we're involved in the community, and I think it translates to an individual level pretty clearly.
I think it makes people feel right too, you know. Like, I mean, I don't think it just about even, you know, you guys and the owners having more traffic, but the traffic, even if it's just the people who come here now and they hear more and more about what you do, they feel better about supporting a business which is being proactive in the community. And to what Rob was saying, I think that's one of the challenges we have in terms of increasing the role or the place of faith in the public square, is convincing those of us who are in leadership that we need to be a little bit more unorthodox about the places that we're prepared to take our conversations.
Right, and that's what I loved about you guys.
Yeah.
And that was your pitch to me, right?
Yeah.
As you mentioned that you want to have an informal setting.
Yeah.
That was, you know, the fact that you guys are drinking and talking about faith. It's a little bit unorthodox, but I think from my standpoint,
Not for me.
Yeah.
No. But the thing is, the feedback I get
Yeah.
from whether they be parishioners or people not in my parish but involved
Yeah.
with the churches, they say, I love the fact that you're doing this in a pub.
Absolutely.
I love the fact that you're just sitting back and having a drink and
For Rob and
chatting
I,
about
it's,
I mean,
it's a natural extension.
yeah, exactly.
It's win-win.
Exactly.
Well, you know,
we'd be somewhere on a Thursday.
we would we
might as
would
well be
very
here.
likely be in a pub having a conversation, and so part of
right.
the idea was, how do we have, and we're often talking about these issues of faith.
Yep.
You know, we see the big news items that are happening, and sometimes we find ourselves querying and asking, you know, like, what are we doing about this? You know, how does the church intersect with some of those really critical issues, right? And I know you studied poli-sci, so you've got lots of thoughts, I'm sure, about the politics of the day.
Right.
But I just think about, like, for instance, I've just this week have heard so much from people in my church, a number of people, some who are teachers, and some who are parents, who are increasingly worried about the state of public education.
Right.
Because there's a situation now in Queens Park where you know, the sex education curriculum was changed. We've had a ton of people come and talk to us about that. I hear questions about that early on. I mean, it's died off now, but when they repealed that, the recent announcement that they want to change the class sizes and possibly roll back full year kindergarten,
the kindergarten
is causing a lot of stress amongst teachers and parents. And I think then for folks who are churchgoers or people of faith, one of the questions they have is, how do we respond to that? Does the church have a position, and what is it that the church might be able to do if we were to sort of mobilize ourselves for whatever reason, and to think about how that might work? And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Stephen.
Well, I think I'd like to start with the question, honestly, because I'm not too sure what the answer is, but I know when the updated sex ed curriculum was launched under the previous government, there was a lot of controversy under parental rights designations and religious rights. So I didn't know where the Anglican Church actually fell on that spectrum, if they were supportive or.
Well, I think that's a part of the problem, is nobody knows where we fall on this.
Right. Yeah, the Anglican Church is, the spectrum is wide.
Of
Yes,
course.
but not only the
Yes,
width of it, the
it's-
fact
yeah.
that we don't necessarily take a position. I think
Right.
that in a large part, if you talk to most of the leaders,
Which I like, to be clear. I
Well,
like that it's a
yeah.
little bit.
I can get that, but the other once in a while we need to jump off the fence.
Right.
And I think that if you talk to most of the leaders across the province, you're going to get. I think you would have gotten largely support for the sex education curriculum because it was bringing kids into a safer place. Really, quite frankly, they were learning more about their own bodies and
I
about
agree.
their own
Yeah.
reality and all
100%.
that stuff.
Yep.
So for us, you know, and what I hear on the ground, and I'm sure you're the same, Rob, but what we hear from a lot of the people and the parents is this is draconian to be going backwards like this, right?
It was
I just seen-
1993,
1995,
1994,
93 or 4, whatever it was. It was back in the 90s when Ian wasn't alive, and you
I
were
would've just
you were
been
listening,
born, yeah.
and you were getting ready to start dancing to boy bands or something. I mean, neither of them knows who Radar O'Reilly is. So I mean, we're gone back in time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's. But then to follow that up with what seems to be now a real change in how our provincial government is going to approach education. And I just wonder, I think it's a telling thing that you say, well, I'm not sure, I didn't know if the church had a position. I think sometimes we need to have one because it's our kids that suffer because of this. What do you think about this, Ian?
I mean, I would love to hear the position of any church on sort of social issues that change, just because it sort of it gives, like, because a lot of younger people, I don't want to stereotype, but there are a few people who are younger who are like, oh yeah, all churches are just evil and things like that. So it would be super interesting to me to hear like a public statement of like a minister or whoever, and just being like, yeah, like, gay people, that's cool, and things like that.
Yeah, like I would
totally
think
agree.
a lot of kids your age I say at Central mightn't know that at the Gay Pride Parade, there was our bishop and a number of our clergy with our own banner marching in a Pride Parade here in the city.
Yeah.
And like, if bringing it back to my own experience with the church, which isn't extensive by any means, but
That's probably why you're a good guy.
well, like I had a very limited exposure prior to going to Huron, and to be totally honest with you, and you're 100% right, because when I went to Huron, I was truly blown away by how progressive, socially progressive, the Faculty of Theology were, not even in an education realm, but Father Bill, who's now Bishop Bill,
Yep.
he would
Shout out to Bill Cliff.
Yeah,
if you're
that's
ever
right.
listening in Brandon,
Brandon.
it may be colder
I
here
was
than
gonna
it is
say,
there.
he's
either.
probably freezing his newbies off. Yeah. He would always take me back just by how progressive he was and open about talking about homosexuality or what have you. And that was only because I had a preconceived notion of what, I thought it was an Orthodox church. And that's just kind of what you have in your head. And then,
Exactly. It's like these people are people and they have opinions. It's not like, oh yeah, the church is just like all like, I don't want to say like conservative, but like it's all like.
Well, I think that's a large perception. That we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
I
Like-
mean, that's what I'm hearing. Is good for you guys to say that, because we got to understand what people's lens is.
Yes,
Before we even
if they don't know who Radar O'Reilly
Right,
is, they
exactly.
do have an opinion.
They have an opinion.
Yeah,
right,
and
they have a thought.
also negativity is more talked about, I guess. Like, think of the news, right? You hear more
you hear
about
the worst stuff.
exactly.
Right.
So like you're
Right.
gonna hear more of the negative side of anything, really, when it
And
comes
they're
to
always the
church and things
loudest,
like that.
too.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure,
Yeah.
exactly.
And the other part of that, I think, then is the loudest Christians sometimes are the most negative Christians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're the ones that are getting front page news.
Right. The
and,
stuff you're reading
yeah.
are, some of the more
Right.
hard-nosed, very far right,
Yeah.
screaming about gays, upset about women in
Yeah,
the church, all
marching
those
at
sorts of
funerals and doing all these
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah.
That's what you hear. So you get an understanding in your head, and so it really shouldn't be a surprise to us that are into church
No.
that these preconceived notions exist.
Yeah.
What's important for us is to say they exist.
That's right.
We need to know that. Yeah.
Did
yeah.
you live at the college when you were there?
No, I was off campus.
Oh, were you? Okay.
I essentially lived there
Yeah.
in my fourth
So
year.
you
'cause
would have
I was-
seen, the point I'm getting at is you would have seen a lot of traffic coming and going at that chapel.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you didn't, as you just said, in your own words, you didn't have much experience of church coming into it.
No, my parents had a very religious upbringing.
Yeah.
And as kids, we attended a United Church. This was in Sarnia.
Yeah.
And then when we came here, to be frank, we didn't really
didn't take
attend
that
except for big events when we would go back to their hometown of Peterborough.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a weird, point where I had almost a very religious or faith-based structure, but I didn't really reach beyond that.
Right.
And then, at Huron, it's a little bit of an anomaly too, because it's an Anglican college, but it's also a liberal arts college. So they're
Yes.
teaching you to question everything.
And a
right?
very big one.
Yeah.
In terms, I don't know of its size so much, but they have a big influence as liberal arts colleges go across the country. I mean, some really prominent people go through there.
Right. Yeah. And so that I would be in the library all the time, which is right across from the chapel. And
Well, you didn't have to tell. I did study. It wasn't often, but Steve and I am aware of where the library is at Huron College.
you never know.
Are you,
know.
Kevin?
Yeah.
Are you really?
You never know. Better safe than sorry.
Okay.
But I would always find myself on a particularly stressful night or what have you, in the chapel's empty, just spending some time in there.
Doors are open.
And there's nothing more peaceful. It's meditative even.
Yes.
Not that I would, have, a pre-written prayer in mind or anything like that, but I felt myself become increasingly spiritual with that beside me. Yeah, totally.
So in connection with that, though, I guess my question is you saw all that activity and as you watched all that, I mean, beyond, I just think that in itself is very profound, that he'd go in there and sit and pray. And
Sure,
I'll use the word pray.
Yeah.
But I mean, meditate, pray, use whatever word for you want. I think that for those who don't largely have a day-to-day existence in church, they don't, you don't necessarily have the language to put around that, right? But what does it look like when you sit in a place like that and you get, sort of, you're aware of something beyond yourself? But all of the watching of people coming and going and seeing what a chaplain was involved in, as you say, hearing the faculty of theology, knowing what you were studying about the issues in the world and poli-sci and all that stuff. I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts about that intersectionality that we're talking about, how the institution of the church might be able to step outside of itself and respond to the issues that are in the public square.
Yeah, I think, you're talking from a position of relevance too. That message is powerful in itself. Yeah, I think first and foremost, and this is just my opinion, of course, but going back to my preconceived notions, I had a preconceived notion before I engaged in Huron of an orthodoxy that was closed off to new ideas, and that is very much a turnoff. So if I have that preconceived notion and you tell me something, I'm not really going to...
You're listening through a filter.
100%. And that's, I think, something that was completely thrown away when I went to Huron, because I would talk to Father Bill or Todd Townsend, who's one of the smartest guys I had met, and here's a guy of the faith, right? So I can't discount his opinions, or just listening to him was fun, because he's the hermeneutics guy, and so he I think reaching a point where people understand your true message, not yours specifically, but the church's true message, where it's coming from in a position of not necessarily, it doesn't have to be progressiveness, but open-mindedness.
Openness, and that's what the great
Gives you
image is
legitimacy.
of your story, Stephen, is that openness, which manifested itself in the day that you could walk out of the library and see the open doors of the chapel,
100%.
and be able to move from that place of study and that sort of thing into that contemplative place because it was open for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just a metaphor for all the many ways that we as the church need to be thinking about how we are open.
That's right.
And are we willing to engage in those conversations with people like yourself and others that say, I want to be honest with you, I'm talking to you through a filter and preconceived notions, but I need you to be open to hear what I have to say about you. And if you let me in on that, then there's space for us to connect with each other.
Yeah. Can I actually ask a question on that?
You, sir, are permitted to ask as many questions as you
student
want.
of theology, or not literally a student, but just
Always
curious.
a student. Always
exactly.
a student.
So, from a theological perspective, the Anglican Church is orthodox in its theology, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's part of my answer is I think the regular person, the average Joe, wouldn't know the difference between an orthodox theology and an orthodoxy on social issues, and a conservative perspective on social issues.
So I think for me, and Rob will weigh in too, I'm sure, but my thought on that is I think there's often not a lot of clarity on what orthodoxy is.
Right, of course.
For me, there's a book written by a guy named Brian McLaren, which I dearly love, called A Generous Orthodoxy, where he talks about how very broad his idea of orthodoxy is. And if you go back early enough to the early church, things weren't as narrow as they became as the church got legs under it. But I think the other part of that is as well that some of it is not so much about orthodoxy as it is about orthopraxy. I mean, I think part of what trips us up as the church is when we practice in a way which is so litigious or sort of pedantic or
Right.
pedantic, sorry, and keyed up in having to follow the rules and do all these things.
Yeah.
It's not always about what we believe. It's often about how we act.
Right.
And when we act in such a way that we exclude or we feel like everything has to follow a certain letter of the law. And I think then what people see is not so much about what the church has always taught, but what the church has become. And those are not always the same. That's how I feel about that,
Yeah.
Rob.
And yeah, Steve, when you bring up the word orthodoxy, I think my first thought is it's about doctrine and right thinking and that preconceived notion from those on the outside is I have to think a certain way in order to belong and be welcome into whatever community it is or thought process or discussion. And if
Right.
I don't think like everybody else does, I'll be excluded. So why even bother?
Yeah, you have to subscribe
Right.
to this belief
Exactly.
set. Yeah.
And I can say my experience in the Anglican Church and why I love the Anglican Church is that that's just not so. Other than, yes, you will meet people
Oh, there are.
that say
There's one
no,
in
you
every
need-
crowd.
Yeah, that you need to be thinking and acting and doing things in a certain way. But for me, I've been blessed to be able to say that I came in with a lot of questions and things from my upbringing as a young person before I came to theological college and didn't understand a lot of things. And my questions were welcomed into that.
That's right.
And they
And I
said,
think that
struggle
was-
with me, walk along with me. Let's break this apart. I think the best thing I ever learned was going to seminary or even theological college in a sense is somebody told me at the beginning, they're going to break you down to nothing in the sense that everything you
Yeah.
thought you knew
Yeah.
will be broken down, and then
Yeah.
they're going to trust the process. It'll all be
Yeah.
put back together again over your time studying. So
Right.
So
It's
it
sort
ends
of-
up not to be about thinking
Right.
the right way as
It's one of the
opposed to
things I
putting
loved
it
about
together.
Huron, now called Huron University.
Yes.
But it's one of the things I absolutely loved about the place, quite frankly, is that I felt like I learned to deconstruct
Deconstruct,
the,
perfect
th-
word.
the
yeah.
things that I thought,
Yeah.
and then have to reconstruct with more learning. And because of that, many things in my life have changed. I mean, I came to Huron College out of a community of 300 people in Newfoundland, with very narrow-minded ideas about homosexuality. All that had changed by the time I left there, not because they deprogrammed me and turned me into a liberal nut, but because I fallen in love with people who were gay, and I interacted with them, and then I studied things, and I thought, what am I really saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So true.
one of the things is that just to sort of go back to this place here again is and your generosity towards us. I ran a book group out of here in the fall. In this very room where we record, in one of the upper rooms, as we like to call it at the church. This is the upper room at Crossings, and it was Brian McLaren's book called The Great Spiritual Migration. And for those who are listening out there, I'd highly recommend this reading, but it's not for the faint of heart, because it really challenges the church to get off of this idea about belief. Not to say beliefs aren't important, but what Brian McLaren says is it's what Rob said a minute ago, that people feel that they got to believe the right things in order to come and be a part of it, where he says our parishes and our communities need to move away from that and towards being schools of love. So being places where what we do and how we interact with the world around us and how we show the love of the peasant Jewish cynic that we follow named Jesus and what that looks like, how do we do that? And if we're doing that, and that's the primary goal, the belief bit is something that comes along with that, perhaps.
Right,
that's so true.
And instead of having to know all the beliefs and tick off all the boxes.
Right.
And so when we use insider language in the church, like when people come and we use words that we're only going to know in the church and stuff like that, it's very easy for people to feel they don't belong because they don't believe all those things.
Right.
I don't believe all the words of that prayer, or I don't believe the words of all that creed or whatever else. And if we're too narrow, then what we say to those people is, this is not a place for you to come and seek and question and search. But for me, I think I want you to come and search and ask all those questions, Right. And one of the things that we're doing at our place coming up, first one will be on March the 3rd, is something we're calling Bridget's Banquet. And Bridget's Banquet is going to be a dinner Eucharist. So the idea being a dinner church is we're inviting people, and the ads that we've sent out for it are very clear. It says, are you full of questions? Do you find that Sunday morning is just too much for you? You can't take it? Would you prefer to sit with people who feel they're not sure what they believe and enjoy some dinner together? And it's meant to be a community. So you come in, you sign up to take a job, whether it's set the table, cut the carrots, do whatever, and we make dinner together. It'll be a small group, and instead of some middle-aged, balding, fat priest up at the front, going off at the gums. It'll be a middle-aged, balding, fat priest sitting at the table, listening to a conversation and a dialogue between everybody who's there, asking some really difficult and critical questions.
Sure. I think that's how you bring people into, and I want to say change their minds, like that's your mission, but as far as
I want them to be loved.
Well, exactly. And I think having that conversation and dialogue is so much more effective than preaching from afar, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, and engage them in the conversation. Exactly. Let them ask those questions, like you said. And,
I mean, it's not
tear
too hard.
a few things apart and chew into it.
Deconstruct it,
man,
right?
Yeah, get into the meat of it.
Yeah. That's totally what Huron University was the focus was on a place of love, not a doctrine to prescribe to.
Right. I'm just wondering if Huron University is at all going to support this particular podcast, because they got a lot.
I would think so. We're getting some good plugs.
It wasn't my intention going into
so
this.
Todd Townsend, if you're, I know
plugs.
Todd, you listen to this. So Todd, you might want to get down to Barry Craig's office and have a conversation, because this is basically a public service announcement for Huron University.
No, that's
No,
perfect.
that wasn't mine
That's
either, but I
perfect,
don't
though.
mind singing their praises. I left Newfoundland and came here. It was one of the best decisions I ever made because of Huron College. I met my wife because of Huron College. I met my friends because of Huron College. I'm sitting here, quite frankly, now because I wouldn't have probably decided to take off to Ontario if I hadn't come here to go to school.
And you met me.
And
so,
I met Rob.
What could go wrong?
Well, nothing.
So there we go. No, that's good, Stephen. That's a wonderful way to understand that and look into it, and it helps people I know that are listening, and our listeners too, to be able to hear that from you. And
Right. I don't want to come across as a pretender either. I'm still kind of going through my own spiritual journey, but
sure.
I mean, Huron was certainly just the start of that. It was the trigger for everything that happened since, because I think I had written it off prior to that, and then you kind of realize yourself you're having internal conversations and debates, and your political science philosophy mind is debating with the spiritual mind.
Well, it's true though. It's a fork on your road.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
That's good. So embrace that. That's good.
I wonder. The only other thing I have on my agenda that I can think of is not to sort of discount the very powerful conversation we're having around theology and all that, but to go back to the business of pubbing and being in pubs. The one question I meant to ask, and maybe this is a good time because my glass has gotten very low and I'm going to need to replenish it. So this
5 minutes into the show, your glass was low.
Garcon. And so I'm just wondering, like, maybe you can share with our listeners who are able to reach this place, how many taps you got down there?
We have 23.
Yeah.
23. 20.
Do you know what's on them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's hear it.
You want me to go down
Go
the
down the
list?
list.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so
Let's put him on the
I'm
spot
gonna
and see if he
start
knows what's on.
Crossing, sirs. Tonight on our tap, we have
Tonight we have.
I won't put a book in front of me either. So starting on the right-hand side, I've got the Powerhouse Irish Red, I've got Muskoka Cream Ale, Muskoka Detour. I've got Coors Banquet. I'm missing one other one on that tap.
Oh no!
Come on, it's
No,
coming.
keep going.
It's
We'll keep going.
Pass.
Steam Whistle.
Ooh.
Coors Light, Ace Hill Lager, Ace Hill Pilsner. I almost said Diageo. Guinness.
Yes.
Rickards Red, Creemore, Granville Island. Our house lager. I don't know if we can count that or not.
Counts.
It counts.
Counts. Okay. Going down. What am I at right now, Ian? You're keeping
You're
count.
at 13.
13.
Oh, jeez.
Unless
Okay.
I
What's
missed
his
one.
title again? What was his title again?
I've got nothing in front of me here.
Was he the corporate beverage manager?
right.
then?
That's right. Corporate beverage manager.
I've got Anchor Steam, Sleeman,
Oh, here we go.
Sleeman Clear,
Back on
getting
the
the
horse.
second
Kronenberg
win now.
1664, Kronenberg Blanc, Summersby. What am I at now?
19.
19.
Oh, not bad,
Oh,
not
we're getting
bad.
down
Come on,
the
you can do it,
wire.
buddy.
I think he can do it. I think he can do it.
Oh, jeez.
Cassette tape's almost out.
Yeah, yeah.
Belgian Noon.
Belgian Moon,
20 right there.
Come on, you can do it, Stephen.
It's Sons of Kent.
Sons of Kent.
Eight track. Sons
Eight
of
track.
Kent, Sons of Kent.
Come
Full
on.
Blast.
Full blast.
And
One more.
did I say 23 or 22?
I don't know, but you're
You
at
said
23 right
23.
now.
You're at
23.
23.
23.
I was at
Hey! All right. Well done.
Okay.
Well done. Corporate beverage manager nails it.
Funny,
Oh,
that's
thank you,
hilarious.
Garcon. I just was delivered another beautiful red What are we calling this again?
That's the Irish Red.
Irish Red
Yeah.
from
The 13th
Powerhouse.
tap across.
This
from
is
the
the
left.
13th tap from the left.
That's good. That's good.
And then
Well,
Lambeth's got 2 extra ones. So they've got the APA, their American Pale Ale, and the Irish Red on. And then Lambeth has got a third Sons of Ken as well, their blonde ale. So.
good.
Perfect.
Good. Awesome. Well, hey, Stephen, we can't thank you enough for not only taking the time today,
Oh, hey,
but as we
my
said,
pleasure.
to opening your doors to us, to giving us the opportunity to come up here to the upper room at Crossings and do what we do. And we've really enjoyed it so far, and it's great to have you guys
Did you
aboard
tell
with
him
us.
that we're on the front page of the Huron Church News?
I meant to mention, I wanted to, put a shout out to Devore over at Church House and those are the Huron
Thank
Church
you for
News.
listening.
Yeah.
Our hosts
because
are
we
Kevin
got
George
front
and Rob
page story on the
Henderson.
Huron
Our
Church
producer
News.
and composer
Yes.
is myself,
I should
Ian,
have brought the
with
coffee
original
over.
Yeah,
artwork
Stephen,
done by
but I'll
Catherine
email
Nolan.
Poke her up on the wall.
If you
Yeah,
have
it's
any
up on the
questions
website.
you'd like to
It's
know
on
how to
the
find
Diocese
us,
of Huron
tweet us at
website,
Vicars
and,
Crossing.
and,
Or
Crossing
find
has
us
got
on
good
Facebook
billing
at
in there.
I've got
Vicars
good
Crossing.
billing, so
If you have
front
any
page
other
story
questions
in the
about
news
anything
what
part
we're
of this
doing, so
podcast,
Well, it's
leave
always
us a
good
comment
to
or
do
look
that.
in the
Yeah,
description to
appreciate it.
find out
All right,
more.
buddy, good. Good to
Thanks.
see you again.
I always
Yeah.
love doing this and just chat. And it's nice to see you guys. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Oh yeah, we're back next week.
You want to talk
recording
just quickly about our next guest, or do we
Yeah,
want to plug that a little
so
bit?
yeah, let's do that. So next week we're doing a recording again on Thursday with Najwa Zebian. Many of you will know her name from a couple of books she's written. First one being Mind Platter. She became very well known across North America as a part in her response to the Me Too movement and her own experience and what she had been through and her public speaking about that. And she's now traveled the world talking about her books. Her books are bestsellers. And she has a new book coming out. She's actually, Rob and I are going to be attending a performance of her
Talbot
poetry.
Street Church.
Talbot
on
Street
Saturday.
United
Yeah.
Church this Saturday, or not Talbot Street United Church, Talbot Street Church, sorry, with the Symphonia playing music
Right.
behind her poetry, and it's going to be a poetry reading. Going to be a beautiful night. Tickets are available if you visit Symphonia's webpage. But she's going to join us next week to share a little bit. She's also a person of great faith. She's a Muslim woman who has been through a lot because of her Me Too experience, and then most recently having removed her head covering, which she had worn, and took some heat for
Took
that.
a little, yeah.
But she's been very faithful to
Wow.
in terms of her own walk and her own journey of faith, and now her very public engagement in that.
Right.
So she'll be with us next week.
And I would highly recommend. I watched her TED Talk.
Yeah, her TED Talk
yesterday.
is
I think
great.
it was. I watched it. Yeah, and it's wonderful. So I can't wait to meet her and,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
and
can't
have
wait
her
to
on.
listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a good time.
So
And
that'll be
Ian,
good.
are you going back to school, or is this like, what time do you get out of bed today?
10, 9:30,
Oh, wow,
something like
that's
that.
pretty good.
That's
He
not
told
bad.
me he was getting up at 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey,
No, but you're on a little break right now, right?
yeah,
Well,
definitely.
well
deserved.
deserved. Well
Yeah,
deserved.
yeah, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, thanks to Stephen once again for joining us. For Ian, and
A shout out to Morgan
and
Sherlock.
Morgan. Hey, Morgan, how we doing over there? Good.
Morgan Sherlock,
gotta
who
get Morgan
listened
on
in.
sometime,
We do.
too.
And
He's a good
and he
faithful
delivered
servant.
beverages today, which I find that really enriching.
Enriching. Yes. Very good. Very good.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right,
Appreciate it.
Good. And so until we get together again next time, we'll look forward to chatting again. My name's Rob Henderson,
And I'm Kevin George,
and remember to always look both ways.
before you cross the street.